Just look at some of the old technology I have here. An old film camera, a camcorder. We used to record video onto magnetic tapes, believe it or not. I love this here, an old Sony Discman, even an old flip phone. Well, you know, the cool thing about technology is always progressing, you know, but that also means that eventually it sometimes comes to an end. And much like technology comes to an end, eventually we as humans do pass as well. I've planned for that eventuality. I have a will that outlines what happens to my property and cash, but have you thought about your digital legacy? Well, I bet most of you haven't. Well, today we're going to talk about that. You know, I look on my iPhone. I literally have 13,000 photos on my iPhone. At home, another 75,000 on a hard drive somewhere. So what about all your social media accounts, your Gmail? What about your music collection, your air miles? Well, today we're going to tell you all the steps that you need to take to look after that for when you do pass. We're going to be talking with the authors of the Digital Legacy Plan. We've got Angela Crocker and Vicki McLeod. They're going to help us understand what we need to do to be prepared. Well, I'm pretty excited. I've got some authors in the studio with me today. We've got Vicki McLeod, Angela Crocker. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. I'm going to die one day. So I have planned for that. I actually have a will, but there's one thing I didn't think about, my digital legacy. You guys have written a great guide here, a book, the Digital Legacy Plan, available in ebook format and old-fashioned paper as well. This was interesting, the stat you brought to my attention. In 100 years, 1 billion people will be dead on Facebook. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of dead. Yeah. That's a lot of dead people, and I've heard some stats that might even be more. You know, when I'm thinking about my digital legacy, there's so much now. I just even think of all my Apple accounts, you know, for my iCloud, like my music subscription, my photos. I mean, where do we even start?
Well, where to start is very much about figuring out where do you live online. You know, what is your digital footprint? What is the scope of it? And part of the work that we did was figuring out that people aren't aware of the scope of their digital footprint. They think of their email, they think of photographs, maybe videos.
There's sort of obvious things that you think of right away, like your social media accounts, maybe that kind of thing. I think we came up with people have around 200 different accounts.
200 accounts?
Yeah, that's the average. So that's not necessarily that you're necessarily a high user of the internet, or
I'm pretty sure you're above average, Mike.
I know, but I actually started, I got out a spreadsheet because I thought, yeah, what if something happens to me if I get hit by a bus? There should be a spreadsheet somewhere that has like my passwords and stuff. And oh my God, it just stuff kept coming to me.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing process. You have to really be committed to keeping it up to date and adding the new accounts, because you launch a new social media network, well, sure, I'll set up an account. Or you buy a new streaming service, well, you need that account too. It goes on and on.
So step one is just getting a spreadsheet going or somewhere writing it down?
Yeah, we call it, in the book, we call it a digital assets inventory. It's something that actually came out of Angela's previous book, Declutter Your Data, when she was trying to give people a tool that you could use to actually get a sense of what is the scope of your personal digital footprint. So we call it a digital assets inventory, and we actually have a handy worksheet. You can download it. If you prefer to do it online, you can print it.
I don't even have to use a spreadsheet. You've got a worksheet already.
We've got a worksheet for you, and you can translate that into your plan, or you can use some other system that might work better for you to capture. But just to really get a sense of what the size and scope is. Then you'll know how much work you've got cut out for yourself in terms of making a plan.
Okay, so you said an average person has 200 accounts. I mean, those passwords are changing all the time. So I'm sure, like most humans, I'm not going to be changing that worksheet all the time.
That's true, but you might want to keep the worksheet up to date for maybe the key things, like the password for your mobile phone and the password for your email account. With those two things, your digital steward, the person who's going to look after your digital footprint after you die, will have a better chance of being able to get in.
Okay, so you just said an important thing there, a digital steward.
Yes.
What do they do?
Well, they work in conjunction with the executor. So when you plan for your eventual death, you write a will, last will and testament, and you appoint an executor. But what we found is that a lot of executors are not necessarily digitally savvy.
Right.
No.
Yeah, many. They might be really good at the financial side, and that's what you want, or they may be very good at helping to navigate the family issues that might arise in your will, but they're not necessarily the person that's going to understand technology well enough or understand how you use technology well enough.
So should you put that in your will, like who your digital steward is?
It shouldn't go in your will necessarily because the laws are still evolving. It's generally recommended right now to make it an adjunct that goes as a sort of an addendum to your will that your lawyer's office
Alongside it.
sort of alongside.
But your lawyer should know?
Ideally, your lawyer knows, but they may not, that there may be a change of lawyer between the firm that you file your will with to the next person who actually executes your will. Figuring out your digital assets is an evolving part of law, and it changes by province, it changes by state, it changes by country. There is no international statute yet, and many of the services that we use are based in the United States or they're based in Europe, and if you're a Canadian, well, those rules are going to be variable. So the digital steward has a really important role to be able to have that access and try and unravel your digital footprint after you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I want to be someone's digital steward. Like that it seems like a lot of work.
I think it'd be a big job, and and I think that what we've noticed, especially as we were doing the research for the book, is that technology, in like many other areas, is moving much faster than the legal world is moving, and it's moving much faster than the platforms themselves, like Facebook, Google, et cetera, are moving to understand and catch up with what might need to happen after someone passes away with essentially their digital identity. It's more than just our accounts. We're actually living lives online, and how do we want that part to be captured is a question that I always like to entertain. It's like, what does it mean to have my identity live on, never mind my assets that might be digital?
Yeah, like what is your legacy?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so worksheet, or use your handy dandy worksheet with your book and appoint a digital steward.
Yes,
That's a
for
good
sure,
start.
2 key steps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Step 3, communicate with your digital steward. You may have written it down as we just talked about in terms of the legal side, but even more important is to talk to that person, not only about the fact that you're going to ask them to be the steward, but also what are your wishes?
Yeah.
Do you want them to delete all? Do you want them to keep some part of your digital identity going? Do you want any parts of your body of work, for example? In your case, you'd have a huge body of digital work online.
Yeah.
Do you want that to live on, and if so, in what way? It's really important that
I'm going to send that all to my
step.
daughter just to torture her. with just like literally weeks and
Give her
weeks
something to
worth
look
of
forward
footage.
to. And with any luck at all, she'll be thinking about this for a long, long, long time.
Very cool. So we're going to have to take a break. When we come back, we're actually going to go through some of the practical aspects of setting up things like legacy contacts in Facebook. Back after this. We're talking with Vicki McLeod, Angela Crocker. They've written a great book called Digital Legacy Plan. Don't want to have to deal with this, but eventually we do pass away, and we don't always think about our digital legacy. We've talked about starting a plan, having a digital steward. So what goes into this plan? I mean, there's all sorts of things to consider. Rewards cards and points and accounts, our Facebook legacy account, and even credit card auto payments. Let's start with credit card auto payments.
I think that's an important one, because I think if you're paying for things automatically, you know that. You've made an agreement with that credit card company or with the service providers that you're using the credit card for. But when you die, typically one of the first things that your estate will do is cancel your credit cards.
Yes.
So often very early on in the process.
Yeah.
So when you think about, you may be auto paying, for example, for Dropbox, which may
Or your
house all
Apple iCloud account.
Yes, may house all of your family photos.
Yes.
So that credit card is closed. The account is therefore closed. Now who has access to all of that information and history, right? Yeah, so it's really important to think through, and that's where that spreadsheet we talked about earlier becomes really important, because if that's listed, that these things are being paid for by your credit card, your digital steward or your executor will know that there's things attached to that credit card that need to be dealt with as well.
Yes, I didn't even think of these things here. So rewards cards and points, like I collect Aeroplan and Air Mile. I think there's like PC Optimum points. I mean, the sky's the limit as far as all the different reward things that you've got going. What do you do with there? What happens when you die? Do they just evaporate?
Well, it really depends on whether or not you know if the person has a shopping account with somewhere where they have points. I had the experience when my mom passed away that she had lots of points, lots of places. She was very good at collecting points. She very much believed in getting her value from wherever she was shopping. And so some of the points, I just took her cards and I went and I spent the money. I had points, I bought a few things. You know?
But did you have her password and everything for
Well,
that?
in many places, you only need the actual card.
Okay.
And so you scan the barcode or the UPC code or whatever it is, and off you go. You can spend those points. Where it gets complicated is if you need access. Air Miles is a great example, because in order to spend Air Miles, you've got to actually log in with the number on the Air Miles card and usually a 4-digit PIN.
Yes.
If you don't have the 4-digit PIN, that's no problem. You can reset it with your email. But what if you've let that email account go because that person is deceased?
Yeah.
So how do you get in? Well, then you have to contact Air Miles, prove kinship, prove death, and there's no guarantee that they're going to let you in.
Different cards may also have different regulations in the fine print, so you'd want to understand that too.
Yeah.
They may
Some might be
allow,
transferable.
some might be, and some might not.
Yeah.
Some might be void upon death.
Yeah.
So you want to know.
So if you had the password and the PIN account, written down for your digital steward, then there's no problem.
Exactly.
But I think that it's pointing also to an important element that we know what our tangible assets are, kind of IRL in real life. That's taken care of through our will and estate. But we're not always as clear about what those intangible assets are that we might have online. Exactly the kind of examples that you're raising, as well as other things that we might have. For example, if you were an online influencer, you might have a community of trust that you have built. So that community of trust needs to be managed by someone. And that community of trust may also be purchasing products and services from you through some kind of an online process that you have built the funnels for, that you have invested the time, energy, and probably money in. So what happens to that? Now, if you're large, that's probably not an issue. You have a succession plan of some kind. But if you're not,
And even for people who aren't influencers, we are living in the era of side hustles.
Yes.
People have a little something
Right, that's
beyond
right.
their job. And so how are they taking payments? Are they using PayPal or are they using Square? There's different places where you can hide pockets of money that might be invisible to your executor.
Yeah.
How do they know where your money might be and how much money is there? Maybe it's a modest amount and it's okay to let it go, but what if you're actually earning significant revenue through your side hustle?
Yeah.
your YouTube channel, your Google ads, all those kinds of things that
Where's
need to
that
be
going?
considered. Where's that going? Especially, and again, if you're small, it's more of a concern. We kind of wrote the book more for that kind of scenario than corporate situation where, again, succession planning and taking care of those kinds of investments is already looked after with in-house. But yeah.
So let's talk about Facebook now. That's, I think, the big social media platform. I mean, billions of people are using it. I think some people know that you can assign a legacy contact, but another way to do it is just make sure your loved ones have your username and password. Is there advantages to disadvantages to either?
Well, there are. I mean, having the username and password provides you with complete access, which is
Complete.
great. And
So
that's
you gotta trust the person you give that to, right?
Yeah, because think about the kinds of Facebook messages that you might be sending privately to friends or other family members that might not, we're not always completely flattering about everything we say in private,
Right.
So
Or you might use words in private that you don't use in public that are maybe language that's not for everyone to see. What's challenging about that all access too is if somebody outside that relationship reports us as dead, even though we may have died, but the person with the username and password is continuing to use that account. Somebody external to that relationship reports you as dead, then Facebook puts up a flag.
Yeah.
And goes,
And shuts down the
Potentially
username
shuts
and
down.
password,
So this is where the legacy contact can be useful. Legacy content is also useful in terms of being able to have access if you don't have the email and password.
yeah, and it creates a memorialized account that I think is, in many ways, is very useful because you can do things like have tributes in there. That person does not have access to the messenger, the side of the messenger that was with other people.
Yeah.
One small example I have is I was researching another book, and I was trying to find my ex-husband, and I wanted to just find out if his sister was still living. And I went online. I had found him on Facebook many years ago, but not really stayed much in touch. But when I went back, I saw that his account had been memorialized. So my plan had been to send him a message saying, "Hey, how are you doing? And is your sister still living?" I realized I was so grateful for that because I have no idea if his children even know that he was ever married before. We were married very young. It was a very short duration marriage. And I was very grateful that we had this memorialized option because I could see, he's passed on, I'm not going to message.
Yeah.
Instead, I went looking up his obituary, then found his sister's obituary and got my question answered elsewhere online. But it could have been a very difficult situation if I had just gone ahead and messaged the account of someone who's dead, not understanding or knowing necessarily whether or not my role in their life was even something their family's aware of.
And that decision to be memorialized, that's a conversation you can have with your digital steward when you're living.
Yeah.
Some people want to have their accounts memorialized. I know that I do. I have a lot of, my son's life has been documented
Yes.
on Facebook, and that's his baby book, if you will. But other people want their account deleted upon death.
Okay,
And
yeah.
your digital legacy contact can go in and do that, and maybe that's your choice.
It's very personal in a way, and that's why you want to have the conversation with your steward about how much of your persona you want to carry on after you're gone. And the options now, technologically, are quite vast. You could live on as an avatar into the future, giving your children advice long after you're gone.
Oh yeah,
For
they would
example,
love. They would love that.
Control from beyond the grave. You know, I think for many parents that's a dream. I don't know.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm not sure about this.
I like this a lot. Okay, we're going to have to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk about the emotional impact of some of the digital aspects of your lives might carry on. We're hanging out with Vicki McLeod, Angela Crocker from the book Digital Legacy Plan, and what to do to prepare yourself for when you do pass away. All the things like your Apple IDs, your music accounts, rewards accounts, Facebook. Let's talk about what to do while you're living. Like, how do you make it smoother for when, eventually we do end?
I think there's one of the things that I really like to advocate for is to be really conscious about what we're posting online. We talked at the beginning about the digital footprint and the scope.
Yeah.
To really ask ourselves, like, how much do we want to grow that scope? Because the more there is to deal with at the end. So to really be mindful, and to think also not only in terms of the amount of stuff and the sort of technical aspect of dealing with it, but also what does it mean for what you're leaving behind? What's the message you want to leave?
Yeah.
What was important to you? What does it matter that people know about you? And to be conscious today while we're living of posting that and making sure that we're kind of drawing that picture so that the life story that needs to be told after we're gone is that much easier to tell. That would be one of my pieces of advice.
It's a good piece of advice. It's also important to remember that the story that we choose to tell isn't the only story about us that's out there on the internet. Other people talk about us, they post about us, they say lovely things, they say nasty things, and so there's a part of our digital footprint that is beyond our control.
Yeah.
And our story, we can craft our story to a certain extent, and maybe we can provide context to the negative narrative or the other narratives that are out there about us by sharing certain things about ourselves. But not everybody chooses to live online in that same way.
No.
But even if you don't have your story out there, you still have a significant digital footprint.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, not only the social stuff, but what about all the files and everything that are on your hard drive? Like, how do you deal with that? Like, I feel sorry for the person getting all my crap, from my laptops and hard drives.
Yes, and if you can start now to deal with that crap, to use some of the tools that we have in the book so that you can start to declutter that, start to really get focused. Do I really need all of these files anymore? We just did a big physical downsize. We moved from a large home into a smaller apartment. I think about my online environment that way too. Like, what's all the stuff I'm hanging on to in my online environment, and do I still need it? And who's going to deal with it when I'm gone? And also, even further to that, are there things there that I actually don't want people to see? In the same way I wouldn't have necessarily wanted someone to come in and clean out all of the little corners of my bathroom, I may not want someone to kind of be looking at the digital skeletons that I might have in my closet as well. So to think about those.
Yeah, like all your messenger accounts. I mean, I think we all probably have 3, 4, 5 different messenger accounts. WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, what have you. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, you've got your digital steward that you assign, like, I guess you give them instructions on what to do with it.
Yes, exactly. You do give them instructions. What do you want deleted? What do you want people to be able to see? And it's not even that it's going to be for public consumption, but you have to think about your children or great-grandchildren or nieces or great-great-great-great-great-nephews. What bits and pieces will be there.
About, I think it was in your first book, or not your first book, the Content Planner book, I think your second or third book. But you talk about whether something is public, private, or personal.
The 3 Ps,
The 3 Ps, and I think that that's a really useful thing to think about while we're living. So is this thing I'm working on here public? So if I died, is that okay with me if everyone sees it? Is it personal in that I want my family to know about it or my loved ones? Or is it private? Is it actually something that's not for anyone else? Or maybe it's just shared between spouses. Many of us I have many romantic and wonderful love letters from my husband, and some of them maybe cross a line that my nieces, nephews, and smaller children might not like to read.
Yeah.
But they're things I want to keep now, but they're private.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so to really think about that online environment in the same same way and use, and we have a worksheet that will help you kind of sort that out, as well as sorting out what are the important milestones in your life that you do want to be sure are remembered.
Vicki McLeod, Angela Crocker, they've written the Digital Legacy Plan, all sorts of great worksheets in here to really scope out and map out what your digital legacy will be. And believe me, there is a lot of stuff that you have to take into account. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
When we come back from the break, we will sum it all up, all the different steps that you need to take to get started doing your digital legacy plan. Well, all good things must come to an end. That includes, unfortunately, our lives. It's important that you do plan for that final outcome. You know, obviously a lot of us look into doing wills, but as we've seen today, your digital legacy is important. And it starts when you're living. So look at all the different digital aspects of your life and just start thinking of what your legacy is going to be. And as far as the planning goes, make sure that you do follow a few of the steps that we talked about today. Assigning a digital steward. Find someone in your life that gets the digital world and that you trust and agrees to do it, and will be your digital steward if and when you do pass. That way you've got everything covered, and all your wishes as to all your different accounts, your photos, your reward miles will all be looked after. And again, check out the book by Angela Crocker and Vicki McLeod as far as digital legacy planning. For Mike Agerbo here on Get Connected, we'll see you again next time.